Hey football fans, welcome to another episode of Throwback Thursday. If you've ever wanted to learn more about the legends of the game, this is the video series for you. The Gridiron Legends series will spotlight members of the Pro Football Hall of Fame each week during the NFL season. Stick around and join me today as I take a look at the last 5 members of the inaugural induction class of 1963. Okay, our first Gridiron legend today is George Preston Marshall. He was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame as a contributor. He was in the league for 37 seasons. He has 2 championships to his name and 6 division titles. George Preston Marshall was operating a laundry business in Washington, D.C. when in 1932 he made the fateful decision to become part owner of the new Boston Braves franchise in the National Football League. His 3 partners dropped out when the Braves' first season losses reached $46,000, but Marshall stayed to contribute to pro football in a unique and most valuable way. Renamed the Redskins in 1933 and moved to Washington in 1937, Marshall's teams, particularly in the 1936-45 decade, were very successful. They won NFL championships in 1937 and 1942, and division titles 4 other times during that period. But as successful as Marshall's teams were, the flamboyant owner left his biggest mark in areas not directly associated with the team on the field. In the nation's capital, Marshall organized the Redskins marching band and spectacular halftime shows, introduced cheerleaders, began a radio network that carried games throughout the South, and led thousands of supporters on pilgrimages to rival cities. The energetic leader was also a force in improving the playing rules to open up the game and make it more crowd-pleasing. He championed the decision in 1933 to split the NFL into 2 divisions, with a playoff game to determine the title, and the liberalization of the forward pass rule. Marshall was totally involved in all aspects of his team's operation and endured his share of criticism for not integrating his team until being forced to do so in 1962. At his funeral in 1969, then NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle summed up the master showman's unusual gift to the NFL. Mr. Marshall was an outspoken foe of the status quo when most were content with it, he said. We are all beneficiaries of what his dynamic personality helped shape over more than 3 decades. So here's another Gridiron legend that is an owner and actually helped innovate the game. Starting with organizing marching bands and halftime shows, introducing cheerleaders. That's all geared towards the fan experience, which is pretty cool. Also began a radio network that carried games throughout the South, which probably expanded the fan base, and then helped support these pilgrimages to rival cities. So the road team traveling has some kind of support wherever they're going. So that's really pretty cool. Also interesting to see that he was involved in the forward pass rule, making that part of the game a little bit more crowd pleasing. So really cool to learn about these kinds of guys that really help shape the game that we know today. Okay, our second Gridiron legend today is running back and quarterback John McNally. He played 14 seasons in the NFL, scored 297 points, and also scored 49 touchdowns. So let's see what he's all about here. John McNally still had a year of college eligibility remaining when he decided to take a shot at pro football. To protect his eligibility, he needed an alias, a common practice in the 1920s. He and a friend passed the theater where the movie Blood and Sand was playing, and suddenly McNally exclaimed to his friend, "That's it! You'll be sand, I'll be blood." So Johnny Blood it was, through 14 seasons in the NFL. At 6'1" and 188 pounds, Blood was unbelievably fast, a superb running back and possibly the finest receiver in the National Football League at that time. He could throw passes and punt with the best. On defense, he was a ball hawk and a deadly tackler. He played on 5 NFL teams in 14 seasons, but his best years came with the Green Bay Packers, with whom he was a major contributor to 4 championship teams in 1929, 30, and 31, and 1936. His off-the-field antics, however, constantly drew attention away from his exceptional playing skills. A talented youngster, Johnny graduated from high school at 14, an age when he was small and immature and could not compete athletically. At St. John's College, however, he began to grow and his natural athletic talents burst into full bloom. He was the basketball team captain and a letter winner in 3 other sports, football, baseball, and track, in his junior year. Some say McNally clung so fiercely to boyhood that he never grew up, at least not until after his pro football days, which ended when he was coach with the 1939 Pittsburgh Pirates. He didn't marry until he was in his mid-40s, and it was his wife, Marguerite, who described him most accurately. Even when Johnny does the expected, she said, he does it in an unexpected way. I heard this allusion to aliases before, and I never really knew what it was about. But apparently, this players adopted aliases to protect their college eligibility if they wanted to try out in the NFL, which is it's really weird, right? Because we don't think of that at all. Today, they forego their eligibility to get into the draft, so that way they can have an NFL career. Where back then it was more of, let's try the NFL and see if that works, and if it doesn't, maybe I can come back to college because I used an alias. So pretty interesting there. Interesting also to hear about his skill and that he graduated from high school at 14. I mean, that's really young. And to imagine him trying to compete on a football field at 14 or 15 when you're so underdeveloped is really interesting. So pretty cool there. Okay, our number 3 gridiron legend today is Bronko Nagurski, running back, quarterback. He played 9 seasons in the NFL. He was an all-NFL selection 5 times, and he had combined yards of 4,031. Chicago Bears fullback Bronko Nagurski was the symbol of power football during the 1930s. His performances took on legendary proportions. Many eyewitness observers insisted that for sheer brutal line smashing, no one came close to Nagurski. Never fancy, he just ran straight ahead, over and through the opposition. Although he is best remembered for his bull-like running, he had no peer as a blocker. His tackling was as effective as any the game had seen. He was the complete player. At the University of Minnesota, he played 4 positions and was named All-America at both fullback and tackle. With the Bears, his defensive play was as awesome as his offensive ball carrying. The jump pass, in which he would fake a plunge, then step back a yard or 2, jump and lob a pass to a waiting receiver, was devastating. His jump pass to Red Grange was responsible for the key touchdown in the Bears' 1932 victory over Portsmouth for the league title. The next year, in the National Football League's first official championship game, Bronko passed for 2 touchdowns, including the game-winning score. When Nagurski couldn't get a raise to $6,500 in 1938, he retired to become a professional wrestler. But in 1943, when the demands of World War II left the Bears short of manpower, he rejoined the team as a tackle. Late in the season, with Chicago trailing in a must-win game, he went back to the fullback position. The 35-year-old Nagurski's line plunges keyed a drive to the tying touchdown and then set up the winning score. A week later, in 1943 NFL title game against the Washington Redskins, Bronko, who was named a first or second team All-NFL in 7 of his first 8 seasons, ended his career by scoring a touchdown that put the Bears ahead to stay. So here's a gridiron legend whose name I recognize, and I didn't really associate with an offensive player. I think I associate him with being a defensive player and the kind of the monsters of the Midway in Chicago. But here, it's talking about his offensive prowess, where he's best remembered for his bull-like running and running over tacklers, which is pretty cool. So very interesting to get into the history here and finally learn about some of these guys. I did know a little bit about his wrestling career, which is pretty cool that they mentioned in here. And just imagine, he could not get a raise to $6,500. I mean, that is chump change today. And, the fact that he had to return to professional wrestling was incredible. So very cool, very interesting. And that is Gridiron Legend number 3 today. Okay, Gridiron Legend number 4 today is running back, quarterback Ernie Nevers. He played 5 seasons in the NFL and was an all-NFL selection all 5 seasons. Of all the records in the history of the National Football League, the one that has survived the longest was set on November 28, 1929, when Chicago Cardinals fullback Ernie Nevers scored every one of his team's points, 6 touchdowns and 4 extra point conversions, in a 40-6 rout of the Chicago Bears. The next week, the former Stanford University star again scored all of his team's points for a 2-game total of 59 solo points. At Stanford, Nevers had gained gridiron fame when he courageously led the Indians against Notre Dame in the 1925 Rose Bowl game. Playing on what amounted to 2 very sore ankles, both of which were broken earlier in the season, Nevers rushed for 114 yards as Stanford lost to the superior Irish 27-10. Stanford coach Pop Warner once called him the football player without a fault and compared him favorably to another player he coached, the legendary Jim Thorpe. Like Thorpe, when it came to football, Nevers could do everything exceptionally well: run, pass, kick, call signals, and play rock-hard defense. After he finished his Stanford career, Nevers signed pro basketball and baseball contracts, and in fact was destined to throw 2 home run pitches to Babe Ruth in his historic 60 home run season in 1927. But pro football also beckoned. In 1926, Nevers turned pro with the NFL's Duluth Eskimos. The Eskimos were a traveling team. That season, the team crossed the country playing 29 games, 28 of them on the road against league and non-league opponents. Nevers reportedly played all but 29 of a possible 1,740 minutes. Injuries forced Ernie to sit out the entire 1928 season, but he returned as the do-everything man for the Cardinals in 1929. In both 1930 and 31, he was also the playing coach of the Cardinals. Nevers earned all NFL honors each of his 5 pro seasons. Wow, so this is really interesting as well. Another guy that I kind of heard about, but I didn't really get into his history. The fact that he scored every one of his team's points in 2 back-to-back games is incredible. Players today are specialized. They don't do more than one thing, so this would never happen again. And the fact that, he was coached by Pop Warner, that's really cool. And Pop Warner compared him to Jim Thorpe. And then, he went on to sign a pro basketball and a pro baseball contract. It just speaks to his athleticism. And, being on the list of pitchers that pitched and gave up a couple home runs to Babe Ruth in his 60 home run season, not necessarily a good thing, but, it's very interesting there. And then going back to football when he turned pro with the Duluth Eskimos. And then to think about the fact that he played with the Eskimos, which is a traveling team, he played 29 games in 1 year. I mean, today we play 17 games, and we think that's a long season. I guess if you count the preseason games, that's 20. And then maybe postseason, you've got, maybe 4 more, that'd be 24. So even by today's standards, nobody would get to 29 games. And to play all of those games every minute except for 29. Just incredible. Really would have been something to see this guy play. So that's Gridiron Legend number 4. Okay, the last Gridiron Legend inducted in 1963, running back, quarterback, halfback, Jim Thorpe. Played 12 seasons in the NFL, and his career number of games is 52. So let's hear about this guy. Just before the season-ending series between the Canton Bulldogs and the arch-rival Massillon Tigers in 1915, Bulldogs general manager Jack Cusack signed the most famous athlete of the age, Jim Thorpe, for the pricely sum of $250 per game. Thorpe was everything Cusack expected him to be, an exceptional talent and an unparalleled gate attraction. With Thorpe as a star and a coach, the Bulldogs claimed unofficial world championships in 1916, 17, and 19. His mere presence moved pro football a giant step forward in the public's estimation. In 1920, when the National Football League was organized, the charter members named Thorpe the league president. While Thorpe's exploits tend to be exaggerated with the passing years, there's no question he was superb in every way. He could run with speed as well as bruising power. He could pass and catch passes with the best, punt long distances, and kick field goals either by drop kick or place kick. Often he would demonstrate his kicking prowess during halftimes by place kicking field goals from the 50-yard line, then turning and drop kicking through the opposite goalpost. He blocked with authority and on defense was a bone-jarring tackler. Of mixed French-Irish and Sac and Fox Indian heritage, Thorpe was born in a one-room cabin in Oklahoma, but when he was 16, his father sent him to the Carlisle Institute, a school for Indian youth. His Native American name was Wathohuk, meaning bright path, something he was destined to follow in the sports world. Excellent at every sport he tried, he gained his greatest fame by winning the decathlon and pentathlon events at the 1912 Olympics, only to have his medals taken away because he had once been paid to play minor league baseball. The medals were restored posthumously in 1982. Although he played 6 seasons of Major League Baseball, football always remained his favorite sport. All right, so here's Jim Thorpe. This is somebody that I've heard of, and I would venture to say that most of us have heard of in some way, shape, or form. I did know that he was multi-sport, one of those generational talents that was good at everything. Did not know that he was the league's first president. That's pretty interesting to find out. And, at halftime, interestingly enough, he's not with the team going over plays and different things like that. He's kicking field goals and drop kicking field goals the other way. Really, really cool. So very interesting to see some of the dynamics here, and the fact that he only got paid $250 a game. I'm sure back then it was a lot of money, but again, by our standards today, pales in comparison to what people make today. Just really cool though to learn about these kinds of players. So thanks for joining me for this episode of Gridiron Legends. I hope I was able to give you a bit of insight into some of the greats of the past. Stay safe. I'll see you next time.